Good evening, you're watching No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. The Supreme Court has a crucial hearing tomorrow afternoon where it has to look at whether the survey of the Gyanvapi Mosque, as ordered by a Varanasi court, goes against the law. The local court had ordered the survey after Hindu petitioners claimed that the mosque is actually a temple before Aurangzeb demolished it in 1699. However, India has a law in place passed in Parliament in 1991 called the Places of Worship Act, which says that no religious structure can be altered and must remain as it stood on 15th August 1947. The only exception to that act was the Ram Janmabhoomi, on which the court ruled in 2019. Now, under the Places of Worship Act, courts are not even supposed to entertain any plea like the one that was entertained in Varanasi. But clearly, the law has been ignored. And it's also clear that it's opening up a Pandora's box. Today, a court in Mathura allowed a lawsuit demanding the removal of the Shahi Idgah mosque there, the same suit that was dismissed by a court in 2020. Here, the petitioners are arguing that this mosque stands on the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Now, there are growing voices within the BJP as well against the Places of Worship Act. The party, which was in opposition when it was passed in 1991, had opposed this law back then. But repealing this law today would have serious consequences for the country's secular fabric. And all eyes are now on the Supreme Court and whether it will uphold the law. Let me go straight across to our panelists this evening. And first, I'd like to go across to Dr. Faizan Mustafa, one of the country's most leading legal voices, the Vice Chancellor of Nalsar Law University with us. Dr. Faizan Mustafa, look at where we've come to today. You had the Varanasi court survey already making headlines. Now you have a Mathura court admitting a lawsuit about the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Are you worried that this has now set off a chain of events that might lead us somewhere down the road of 1992?
Nidhi, ideally the lower courts should not entertain such petitions because Supreme Court is already seized with the petition of examining the constitutionality of 1991 Act. I can understand that Supreme Court may strike down the Act. Supreme Court may say that their observations in the Babri Masjid judgment about the 1991 Act were arbiter because no arguments were held on the 1991 Act. So it came in the judgment, there was no debate as such, so to say, by the lawyers in this case. Parliament is also well within its right to repeal the Act or amend the Act. But the courts below high courts should ideally wait for the Supreme Court judgment. The speed with which the Varanasi court has heard this matter, I think in civil matters, such a speed is rarely seen. But since Supreme Court has not stayed the proceedings before the Varanasi court, the court is well within its right to do whatever they feel like. So I'm not worried about 1991 Act going or being amended or being repealed. For me, the larger question of inter-community and relationship between faiths is important. I have been saying it for some time that no law in itself can either bring in a reform, that is my position on Uniform Civil Code also. I have been saying that normative changes in law don't change the society, don't bring the social reform. Similarly, no law in itself can protect any mosque. If we want that there should be some closure on such disputes, ideal situation is that the local residents should enter into a dialogue and have some outside the court settlement. Because in a litigation battle, there will be one party which will win the case, there will be another party which will lose the case. It
okay,
is
that's
only
interesting.
In alternative dispute redressal methods like mediation and arbitration, where both the parties.
I guess my question would be whether it should even come to that, given that, okay, yes, the Places of Worship Act is also being challenged in the Supreme Court currently, but it is currently the law of the land. And
that's
therefore,
why I'm saying that the lower court ideally should not have done it.
Yes, and ideally the Supreme Court should have stepped in and stopped it much earlier. But there's politically a certain churning happening as well. We have Priyanka Maurya, who's from the BJP in UP, in fact, joining us as well. And I just wanted to ask you, Priyanka Maurya, that is there a growing feeling amongst in the party that it is time to revisit the Places of Worship Act, that actually, there are growing voices even within the RSS also now who are saying it should be repealed.
जी बिल्कुल, क्योंकि जिस तरीके से पीछे भी अक्सर विपक्षी इस तरह से कहते रहे हैं कि जब भाजपा आएगी, जब बीजेपी आएगी तब रामलला का मंदिर बनेगा, और कैसे बनेगा, कब बनेगा, वो करके बीजेपी ने दिखाया है, भगवाधारियों ने ये करके दिखाया है। और जिस तरीके से अब यहाँ पे ज्ञानव्यापी का पूरा मामला चल रहा है सुप्रीम कोर्ट में, हमें कहीं ना कहीं इसका इंतजार करना पड़ेगा। और बहुत ही अच्छी बात डॉक्टर फैजान ने कही कि कोई एक केस या तो लूज करेगा या तो कोई विन करेगा। और इसमें बस एक जो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर ये है कि भाईचारे के साथ बहुत अच्छे तरीके से लॉ एंड ऑर्डर मेंटेन करते हुए, चीजों को समझते हुए कहीं ना कहीं ठीक तरीके से फैसला आने का इंतजार करना चाहिए। और जिस तरीके से ये इतने समय से ये कंट्रोवर्शियल स्टेटमेंट्स चल रहे हैं और 91 का जो एक्ट लगा हुआ था उस पे भी अब जो ये फिर से पिटीशन वगैरह चल रहा है, इस पे कहीं ना कहीं हमें वेट करना होगा और यही सही तरीका है।
Okay, so it's clear where you stand on this issue. Yogendra Yadav, to come in on this, where do you think we're headed with all this? How far are we going to dig into our past in order to hurt our present and our future?
That really is the question, Nidhi, to my mind. Do we want to live in our past, or do we want to really build our future? There is no doubt, at least to my mind, looking at whatever little history I understand, that the Gyanvapi Masjid of Banaras was constructed after the destruction of a temple. That's a reasonably established fact. About Shivling, I don't know, doesn't look like a correct picture, but let us, for the sake of argument, assume that that particular construction is originally a Shivling. Now, do we want to revisit it? If we want to revisit it, do we want to open it to all such structures in the country today? It is not merely Kashi and Mathura. Then someone would say that some of the famous temples of East India, including Jagannath Temple, someone might argue, rightly or wrongly, would say that these were built on the ruins of Buddhist structures. Dig them up, find out whether it was Buddhist or not. Someone would say in Karnataka, some of the famous Jain temples were destroyed. Someone would say that many of the Hindu temples were built on the Jain structures. Just now unearth them, have a court case, dig them up, find out the truth. How far do we want to go? To my mind, this country has to draw a line somewhere. And to my mind, that line is 15th of August 1947. This country has to say, we stop going in our past after this day. Whatever existed on that day, good or bad, exists there. Let us now move forward. And Nidhi, if those friends who, because I know they are very strong feelings. Feelings are, okay, we were defiled for 500 years when they ruled. Today it is our rule. We shall decide what happens. Don't stop us because you could not stop someone else 500 years ago. To all those friends, to all those enthusiasts, I want to say with folded hands, please remember, if you want to do something today because you think you are in majority, you can get your way past for something that happened 500 years ago, please think for 1 second at least about what may happen 500 years from now. Are we willing that our children, our generations to come, may then pay a price for what happened in 2022? Are we into this game? Nidhi, I just want to remind ourselves that today this country, the Ministry of External Affairs has said that China is constructing a bridge on what we think is our land. In this country, inflation is going beyond control. In this country, unemployment is high. But is this what we want to discuss as a country? I'm truly astonished and amazed and sad.
Exactly. And honestly, the only reason we are talking about it on this channel is because it has consequences for interfaith harmony. Not because we are worried about whether there is a shivling or not. To be very honest, that's a completely separate matter. But Shadhan Farasat, How much of a test is this case for the Supreme Court in particular? I know that Dr. Faizan Mustafa said that there were certain observations they made in the Ayodhya judgment, but they were very strong observations. It's part of the judgment. They said the courts cannot today take cognizance of historical rights and wrongs unless you show that their legal consequences are enforceable in the present. Human history is testament to the rise and fall of rulers and regimes, and the law cannot be used as a device to go back in time and provide a legal remedy. While, in that same judgment, really upholding the importance of the Places of Worship Act. How much is tomorrow a test case for this Supreme Court today?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a test case for the Supreme Court. I think the judgment is of November 2019. Literally, the ink has not even dried on that judgment. And the other part of the judgment, one part of the judgment is, of course, that it was decided that the land will be given for the purpose of the Ram Janambhoomi temple. The other part of the judgment, and effectively, any reader will read that judgment as effectively a court trying to cut a bargain. Is that this is it, no such further claims. And that's what the Places of Worship Act says. And it's interpreting that act to say that's the only exception in Section 5. And it then pivots it to a constitutional proposition and says there is a principle of non-retrogression in the Constitution. And all this act does is incorporates that principle in a specific act of Parliament. So I think it's a big test whether the words really mean anything, because this case has come within 2 years of that judgment. So I think it is undoubtedly a test. I just want to make one additional point on the Places of Worship Act. Today, the BJP may get very excited because it's in a context which suits their politics. But please understand that the Places of Worship Act is religion blind. It is not it does not mention any specific religion. So if it goes, like Mr. Yogendra Yadav was saying, we will all, people of India, be contesting against each other on the respective claims. I have a quote in front of me from Swami Vivekananda from his complete works, which says that Jagannath temple was undoubtedly built after destruction of a Buddhist temple. Is BJP open to exploring that claim? Is BJP open to then having a survey done? Is BJP open to having the Jagannath temple dug up? So don't, in your excitement for something which you think will suit you politically for the moment, destroy our entire history. There's a purpose to the Place of Worship Act, which is that irrespective of what has happened, and there's a lot has happened. Don't think the history of India begins with the Mughal history. There's a lot which has happened before that. So if you're going to open it up, then all we'll be doing for the future is fight each other. So my understanding of this is the act is for a very good purpose. It has been held to be on a constitutional pedestal, at least the principles which are incorporated in that act. And it makes a lot of sense if we have to go forward as a country to keep that act, and most importantly, to keep the principles which are incorporated in that act, because that is for a healthy India in the present and in the future.
I think that's very well articulated. Geeta Bhatt, is this, in your view, actually a very calculated BJP strategy to make, in the run-up to 2024, to make now the, Ram Mandir ho gaya. So let's focus on Kashi and Mathura and make these the big issues, in the run-up to the next general election. This as Shahdan Farasat said, will have serious consequences. But then it's a distraction, isn't it, Geeta Bhatt? Because nobody wants to talk about inflation, the economy, price rise, the Chinese occupation of our land. We're all talking about Mandir and Masjid.
First of all, there are very learned people who don't talk much better than me. But as it has also been mentioned that in the Places of Worship Act, first of all, there is an exception of Section 4, which says that any such monuments or structures which archaeologically which are proven to be very, very old, then they are the ones who find an exception from this particular. Secondly, now. You see,
the only change was made to a structure after 1947, not anything else.
Please, Nidhi, at least give me a minute to speak.
Yes, but if you say something that's incorrect, I'll call you out. So please let me do that.
So please do understand that when you are saying that if all this has to be have some political motivation, let us understand that. We all know, and Yogendraji accepted it also. There have been invaders when they came, they destroyed temples, and from the rubble they have made the mosque. And there are ample number of proofs, but it is not about that. But there are a few places which are very sacred for the Indian and for the Hindu culture and spiritual heritage. And Kashi is one of them, for which Mark Twain himself had said that it is older than the history, it is older than the tradition, it is older than the legend. So, keeping that in mind, there are sentiments which are attached to some of the
But
places
sentiments,
which are important.
those
Now, the
sentiments
point
have to
is,
be,
no, Nidhi,
those
you
sentiments may be
let
there,
me-
but there is
please,
also a law
let
in
me-
place.
But why is it that there is a sense of denial in the, if you look at in terms of the so-called leadership of the Muslim community, there is a total denial. They are in a denial mode to even accept that yes, there was a temple and it was destroyed, and over this mosques have been made. At least one can start. Professor Mustafa was talking about in terms of interfaith. There should be a dialogue. People should talk. That can happen only when there is first they need to come out of denial mode and stop glorification of tyrants and iconoclasts like Aurangzeb. That
Who has glorified Aurangzeb? Who has glorified him?
The so-called Muslim leaderships are going to the grave of Aurangzeb and trying to pray and trying to instigate the situation. You yourself know who. All India MIM leadership which has been going over there, and they are the ones who go there and they are praying and trying to create an atmosphere. Why is it that Indian Muslims, they are more than 95% of Indian Muslims are natives of this place. Their ancestors were Hindus. They converted somewhere, few generations back. So why is it that they need to stand with someone like, in the history, a stand like Aurangzeb? So this kind of a dialogue which is being talked about, that can happen.
Firstly, that's quite a sweeping generalization and a falsification of history to make so blatantly on national TV. Please, Shadan Farasat wants to counter you on that. Shadan Farasat, I'm sorry, no, I'm not going to let you do
What
that.
is blatant about it? What is blatant about it?
Shadan Farasat.
If we are going to explore our history and revisit all of it,
let's have a
then
history
all
lesson.
six of us on this panel, the only original inhabitants of this country are the Adivasis and the Dravidians.
Everybody is an
all six
outsider.
of us, all six of us are, if you really go back, our ancestors are from outside, irrespective of religion. That's the whole. We are all descendants of Aryans. So, should a petition be filed tomorrow in the Supreme Court or any other court that except Adivasis and the Dravidians, all other Indians should leave the country? Is that way? I mean, if you are arguing something, then take it to the logical end. Then take it to the logical end. Don't be selective.
But no, why aren't you answering the question? Are more than 90% of Muslims, aren't they native Indians? They are native Indians.
None of us are natives. All of us, all six of us, our ancestors came from outside. The only original inhabitants of this country are the Adivasis and the Dravidians. That's all. That's all. Yes, please read history, Ms. Bhatt. Please read history, Ms. Bhatt. Ms. Bhatt, please read history. Please inform yourself.
The real history, I'm sorry to say, you can.
Yes, the real history is the Hindutva history.
I'm sorry I have to intervene here because my question on how all of this is distracting from everything else, Dr. Faizan Mustafa, it's distracting from inflation, it's distracting from the present. And is this not, in your view as well, as a political observer, to a clear political strategy that this is what 2024 is going to be about? Because the last election was about Ram Mandir.
Is that question to
Dr.
me?
Mustafa?
No, I'm not the right person to speak on electoral strategies of political parties. My worry is that for harmonious and cordial relations between the communities, there has to be a give and take, and there has to be a closure somewhere. So what Yogendra Bhai is saying, that closure is the 1991 Act, that except the Babri Mosque, for rest of the places, we are having a closure, that whatever was their character in 1947, 15th August, we will maintain it. Now today, if the parliament feels that that law is not right, Parliament can amend it. If Supreme Court feels that their observations that it is a law which is consistent with the basic structure of the Constitution, but it violates Constitution, they may strike it down. But it will not bring an end to anything. If we want
May
to
I
bring
say
an
very
end to
respectfully,
anything,
Dr.
I think
Mustafa,
there
that
has
when you
to be
speak
some
of
kind
give and take,
arbitration.
when you speak of give and
Ms.
take
Bhatt
in the
is right,
context in
that
which we are living in today, is that the right line to take? I mean, we're seeing a sort of brute majoritarianism on display. Are you asking the Muslim community, are you asking this country's minorities to compromise on everything?
No,
And
I'm
where
not
is
saying
our
compromise
dignity?
on
Where is the
everything.
rule of law?
I'm saying
There is
that
a
the
law in
local
this country
people,
which is in place.
Local people should negotiate
Why?
and reach some kind of settlement.
Why?
Why? Because that will create goodwill.
You sound a lot like the Supreme Court bench that passed the Ayodhya judgment in 2019. Yogendra Yadav?
Nidhi, I have been writing on that judgment also. I have been saying that they may have given this land to the Ram temple, but ideally they should have invoked 142 to do it after deciding the title. What I am trying to say that keeping our society polarized is too big a price to have rule of law and to fight legal battles.
Well, in
So
a sense,
rather
you're
than
throwing your
fighting
hands up
legal
and saying,
battles, settle
very
disputes outside the
respectfully, you
court.
sound like you're throwing your hands up and saying, well, let's just compromise, let's just find a way to live peacefully because we don't have a choice. Let me get quick last comments. Yogendra Yadav first.
I understand and respect what Professor Mustafa is saying. Yes, behind every law there is a compromise. Every law in this world, every constitution of this world, in the last instance, is a social compact. The trouble, Nidhi, is this can be done once. It cannot be changed every single day.
Yes.
In 1960, RSS said, there are only two places in this country that we find sacred. We don't bother about everything else. Give us two, we will not talk about anything else. And those two places, incidentally, did not include Ram Janam Bhoomi of Ayodhya. The RSS said we are concerned only about Kashi and Mathura. Then it comes to Ayodhya. Then everyone says, okay, Ayodhya and nothing else. Then once Ayodhya happens, now it's Kashi and Mathura. Once Kashi and Mathura happens, then there would be another long list. You cannot change a social compact every day. I understand the spirit of give and take. But in the last instance, the law of 91 is important not because it's a law. It's important because it gives a legal wording to what can be an only fair and reasonable solution once and for all to these feuds in this country. Otherwise, Nidhi, while Dr. Bhatt is absolutely right, yes, we have long history. There are umpteen examples in which Muslim rulers have destroyed Hindu temples. There are umpteen examples where Hindu rulers have destroyed Hindu temples of another because they have to change the Kul Devata. There are umpteen examples where Buddhist temples were destroyed, Buddhist places were destroyed, Jaina temples were destroyed. Now, where do we have a social compact? Where do we say this far and no more? And to my mind, 15th of August 1947 happens to be that day. And the Act of 91 is nothing except a legal wording to say simply this much and no more. Therefore, we must respect it. It's not merely a piece of law.
Yes.
This is the only way to live forward in this country.
All right, let's see what the Supreme Court does tomorrow, if it does anything at all. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight. That's all the time we have for this evening. See you again next time.